an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Season 1, Episode 7, The Hidden Truth. In this episode, well, somebody did totally destroy the library, but it turns out that doesn't matter that much in the end. And Ed and Al figure it out. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. What's up, Max, if you're out there? How are you doing? So this episode is focused on finding the research, R.E., the Philosopher's Stone. So far, like the research that he has found, I am pretty sure isn't entirely complete, right? Like, so here's my question. Was the Philosopher's Stone that he had seen before a fake and broke apart because it didn't contain what turns out to be the final essential ingredient due to the fact that our guy, Marco, he didn't want to sacrifice anybody in order to get that ingredient? Or did he figure out that a life was an ingredient and that was one of the things he had figured out up to the point where it was like 90% there? Is that like that? I was thinking it was the second one, that he had figured out, okay, human life is definitely a requirement, but I'm going to, I have figured that part out, but I'm going to need to figure out some more things to get this perfect. Or did he figure out fully how to do it and he never wanted to reveal that he had figured it out fully due to the fact that people would actually try and make it? Sajigi says, Natasha in the last episode, would Les try to stop Ed from learning more about the Philosopher's Stone if she knew about it? I mean, she'll burn down a fucking library. Yeah, I wasn't ready for exactly... So, did she kill Marco? I'm assuming she killed him. I feel a little bit bad about that. He seemed to really be trying to, do his best to make up for things. And honestly, I think if you told him that he was going to be murdered at the hands of a supernatural force because of his research, I think he'd probably be like, yeah, that tracks. I think that he would just figure that was fair after everything and he wouldn't put up too much of a fuss about it. That said, it sucks. This place lost their awesome doctor, and as somebody who is currently going through some health stuff, finding a good doctor, man, that is not an easy thing. So that sucks. All right. I have to start from the beginning. I keep doing this today. I just keep doing it. I always start with the thing that I just want to start with. And while I am allowed, we've got Lust, and she is looking at the library that she destroyed. Ed and Al are freaking out over the fact that they came all the way here for this, and it is fucking burnt down. It's not just burnt down either. It's burnt down and it's broken, like somebody came at it with a wrecking ball. Lust came in like a wrecking ball. And they begin to just sort of go through the rubble eventually, which is how they find their new friend whose name I can't remember. Ryan says, that's the risk. If you do human sacrifice research, you might get killed by some mysterious person someday. I think that's true. You start getting into human sacrifice and you have got to take it for granted that now your life is on the table, right? Because who fucking knows what door you're opening with that? So I think that's entirely fair. Oh, Candace says she dropped a weird comment too. She reports to father. Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, is that the devil? Because I figure it's the devil. We've got the 7 deadly sins out here. I don't see why we can't also have a devil. But I don't know. Maybe father is one of the sins. They say the greatest of them all is pride, right? Is it vanity? Is pride one of them? Or is it vanity? I think it's pride. I don't know. But I had definitely assumed they were working for somebody once envy came along. Otherwise, if it had just been lust and gluttony, I might have been like, well, maybe lust is doing her own thing and gluttony is like close with lust and just decided to sort of come along for the ride. But once envy showed up and seemed to be like fully cooperative with whatever was going on, I was like, all right, yeah, this is definitely like a whole thing. In the structure with which these things usually go, I would anticipate that we don't get to see who her father is for like at least another, probably to like the end of the season, I would say normally, but I don't understand how these seasons are set up because I still haven't looked into it. So, with like One Piece, the seasons are fucking, it just doesn't even matter. You don't even talk about them and I don't know if that's the same thing here. Kyle says pride. Michael is naming them all. Pride, lust, sloth, gluttony, wrath, envy. Doc? What's Doc? Sorry, Michael. But I am... So, whatever it is they're trying to do, she's attempting to keep Ed from the research for some reason. We know that they are planning to kill Ed at a later, more appropriate time for something. We don't know what yet. And I'm assuming we need to keep him away from this research because it means that he would be able to potentially defend himself from however they're going to come at him. And otherwise, I don't see, and is he going to be the only one? They're talking about this all like they are, like he is so particularly special. Which, for the sake of a story, you often have the main character be somebody who's like, it was prophesized or whatever. But there is something about Ed here that I'm wondering if it's related to the way that he like tapped into the fucking mysteries of the universe with that weird being that he encountered that causes him to be more valuable somehow. Or if that weird being is her father? Perhaps? I don't know. Ryan says that Michael's thing was a 7 dwarves joke. I'm sorry. Doc, I looked like a typo. If you had done like sneezy or something, I probably would have gotten it. So... these are all right. I'm gonna go into the actual episode itself before I start getting sidelined with my fucking theories, because that's always what I do. Guys, it turns out that greed and gluttony are going after Scar. I am truly surprised by this. It's just very like, it opens up a whole nother set of questions. They go after him in the sewers where he is hiding. I love that he like sees all these rats fleeing and is like, oh, that can't be good. And then Gluttony comes for him. Scar holds them off. What? How? They are supernatural in a way that I assumed if they decide to come for you, that's kind of it. And Scar takes Gluttony's arm off, and then you see, like, Lust coming at him fast and hard, as Lust would like it. And it cuts away. I'm assuming this guy is dead. I think we were meant to assume that. And then we cut back to the scene later when the colonel is investigating and he just can't find a body. And of course I'm thinking, oh, there's no body because Gluttony ate him. Problem solved. That's no mystery. No, not so. Scar got away. And Lust is like, ugh, that is so annoying. We are going to have to deal with it eventually. God, like, Lust is truly just, this is tiresome, you know? I was totally shocked. Scar can stand up against the 7 deadly sins. 2 of them of the 7, granted, but nevertheless, I wasn't thinking that he had that kind of power, and it's weird, like, does the fact that he stops that destruction, was that something that they didn't know? Or did they just, like, have an off day? Or did they just completely wildly underestimate him? Gus says, Scar was holding off like 4 state alchemists before. Yeah, but those are people. So, sure, you know, you can have him hold off as many actual human beings as you want, and I'll just be like, well, he's really good at what he does. But then you have like these like they are the personifications of concepts of human frailties and faults. They are not people. So I am just figuring they can kind of do whatever they want. You know, I'm figuring they have an ability far outside of what a human being could do. And because we have like seen them roll up on a few people so far and just take care of them, no problem. So I'm just thinking, well, I guess they're checking another one off the list. And the fact that he manages to like take them, that puts him into an entirely different class at this point. I was willing to believe that he was just an unusually gifted alchemist and truly like brutal and good at his job. But then you do this, and that's different. This is a whole other thing. So they are, like I said, there's this whole thing with him having gotten away. And that is the thing that Lust is saying, oh, I have to go and report to Father. She doesn't really seem nervous. Lust doesn't, about having to report to Father. I was surprised because once she said report, I was like, oh, is somebody going to be like mad at her that she didn't pull this off? And she doesn't seem particularly concerned that they're going to have a negative reaction, which is part of like the question of whether or not Father is somebody that she actually sees as an authority figure or respects or not. I don't know. We haven't seen almost any other sins so far. What are they working on? Are all the sins united in this? Or is there a schism? I have a lot of questions. Okay. We have the, after that moment, we've got the scooping up of Ed and Al from the site of the library, which has been completely demolished. And they are being brought to another area. I'm trying to find these people's names that take him on because he is really annoyed about having another set of bodyguards. Ross is one of them, and the other one, I haven't seen the name yet. So there is a woman who used to work at that library, and when he hears that she used to work there, there's a moment of interest. And then when they're like, well, but it's been a while, he sort of immediately, like, his, what's the word I want? His expectations drop. But it turns out that he had every right to be excited about this. So they go into this other library, and there are so many books that there isn't room on all of the shelves. They are piled in such a way as to be extremely unstable. And one of these people who has come in everybody's like sort of sideways, like doing that thing where you just squeeze by and you suck your stomach in to try and not touch anything. And they come across a girl named Sheshka. And she is trapped under a pile of books. She's got her hand out with her glasses, her like reading glasses on her hand. And that's all they can see. And they dig in there to try and help her. And she is so thankful because she really thought she was going to suffocate under a pile of books. I am going to screen share now because I need you guys to watch this as if you haven't ever seen it before. Because I know that all of you are used to this. And I really hope that you can put yourself in my shoes and watch this entire thing as if you aren't super familiar with this genre and you haven't seen this before. Okay, so this moment where she is introducing herself, she basically does like a full soliloquy. All Ed does is ask, so you worked at the library. That's all. And this bitch, that is all she needed. I swear to God, guys, this was so hysterically funny to me. It was a combination of the fact that they actually have her like floating away, like she's got wings at one point, which just sure, why not? I mean, you're doing everything else, you may as well. But also the fact that they keep cutting back to Ed and Al just watching her in this sort of like bemused way. And that grounding and reminding us she is in this building with these people. They're just observing her completely losing her shit is so good. So like there's literally a spotlight that shines down on her as she is on her knees in a moment of just desperation and despair. And she has lost her job because all she was good for was reading. She couldn't even remember to do her job. I'm hopeless. The only thing I can do well is read. I'll never find another job as long as I live. I'm useless. And she gets huge. And when Ed cuts in and is like, we have a question, she's still giant. Like as if Ed and Al are in a movie theater and she's being projected on the screen and they're in seats watching her. And then we come back to real life and she's just like, you know, a person talking. But y'all, I know that we have seen this sort of thing from Armstrong, but this is different because of how it involved like flashbacks and the just overall, the whole feeling of it for me was really, really different. So yeah, that's something that I wanted you all to see and understand how I was transported by it. I loved it so much. This medium, it's really interesting to see the different ways that it is put to use because, you know, anime just gets kind of flung into a basket. Anime. And when I say this, I do not mean by people who know what they're talking about, for the record. I mean, it's flung into a basket by people like me who don't know anything about it and are just like, oh yeah, that genre. And when I stop and think about that, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, like other than when you do that with something like horror, and then you realize, oh, Cabin in the Woods is considered horror. But Silence of the Lambs is also considered horror. And those things don't really have almost anything in common. And you begin to see, like, a genre name doesn't mean very much, actually. Actually, I say Silence of the Lambs is considered horror. That might be considered a thriller. I might be lying. But you know what I'm saying. Like, there are movies that are considered horrors that are not at all, like, they share no elements. And they both are technically in the same genre, and you're just kind of like, I guess. I mean, I don't know what other genre I would call it, so I suppose. And seeing this versus, One Piece versus the movies that Candace had me cover, which I can't remember that director's name, Candace. But those were also anime, but are done in a very, like, they're done with a sort of photorealistic quality for all of the backgrounds, even though the characters look very, like, cartoony anime. All the other elements don't really. They look computer generated almost. They are so real. It's just wild how completely different all of them are. And I find it really fun to sort of see that, like, have it come out as a surprise as I'm in the midst of covering and not being prepared for it, because it's just very enlightening. And it makes me understand why certain animes have, like, a really intense fan club behind them while others don't. And it might not just be because of the plot. It might be because of the style, and people are really into that as well. There's just a lot to it. Cam is here. Hi, Cam. Kyle says, well, hey, if this doesn't work out for her, she can start a podcast and then people will pay her to read books. Kyle, she would have to stop reading in order to record. I don't know if she could manage to do it. She could be really good, though, at, like, doing, like, narrated, like, if she was somebody who narrated audiobooks, that might work for her. So she's just reading out loud. I feel like she could be good for that. Gus says anime and manga are more like a medium and less like a genre. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Candace says there are a lot of valid reasons for people to side-eye anime, but depth of storytelling and expressing emotions isn't one of them. Yeah, well, definitely not expressing emotions. Kyle says, I believe they invented the term psychological thriller, so film snobs could admit to liking Silence of the Lambs without admitting to liking a horror movie. That's the kind of thing that sounds like a joke. And then you look into it, and truly that was, like, the invention of a new genre. You know what I mean? Like, Kyle, I think you might be right about that. Candace says, anime and manga also have the added culture difference of demographics. Shonen/shoujo, etc. aren't genres either, they're demographics. Yeah, Candace, I believe it was Gabriella. Gabriella did a wannabe episode with me for a One Piece, and I asked about the different types of anime and manga, and she outlined them for me. I don't remember, like, any of it at this point. Sorry, Gabriella. That is not... I am not casting aspersions on your explanation. It is simply water off a duck's back at times with information for me lately. 2022 is a tough time, guys. I don't think anything is sinking in anymore. I'm like a sponge that has had water dripping on it, and now it's all leaking out the bottom. I can't absorb anymore. I'm at capacity. That's it. I'm done. I can retain it for, like, a given period, and as soon as it's not necessary anymore, it's out. I don't love it. It's not super helpful, but there it is. So anyway, okay. Refocusing. So she is questioned about the notes and whether or not she's heard of this guy, Marco. And she's like, that sounds familiar, but of course, Ed is assuming, oh, okay, well, she saw them, which is cool. It means they were there where he said they'd be. But they're burned up now, so whatever. And he starts to walk away. And she's like, I don't know if this is helpful at all, but I remember literally every single word of everything I've ever read. Is that something you'd be interested in? This is, there's a whole thing in Dresden Files with a character who can do this. And I don't want to spoil anybody, but that doesn't turn out awesome. So you'll forgive me for wondering about this chick a little bit. I am pretty certain she is who she says, and all of this is just like a talent that she has. But there is something about like the incredible convenience of her being here. I understand that basically it's probably just we needed him to get the information, but we also needed Lust to be able to try and stop him in a believable way that would make her think that she had succeeded and there was no possible way around it. And that's probably all it is. But I just feel like I have such a highly suspicious nature these days, kids. And I side-eyed the shit out of her. It's just there's so many sly boots in this show. So anyway, okay. She asked them if they would like that. And they're like, yes, please. Can you just write it down? And I love this. She writes it all down. It takes 5 days for her to do it. And she like apologizes that it takes so long. Girl, stop apologizing. Don't anymore. Like, you are a miracle. Okay? Own that. You could single-handedly replace the entire library, it sounds like. You are a like national treasure. You're like an archive that needs protecting. Somebody has to assign some bodyguards to her because I feel like she could be a fucking target now. That's just, that is real. Ryan says a very useful stranger shows up. You have to wait for the betrayal. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's just, I'm just worried about it. That's all. And she presents this information that she has finally written out to Al and tells the guy who's like assigned to him, Ross, I think, that it's like, as he's reading it, sounds like a chicken soup recipe or something. It's calling for like celery and salt and things like this. It doesn't sound like an alchemical recipe at all. And this dude is like, why did you think that this was an important document? And I'm like, because she is a smart person, unlike you, who suck. How about you stay in your lane, bruh? Nobody asked you. I'm just saying, don't comment on shit you don't understand, okay? Meanwhile, Al is reading it and just like, oh, fuck, yes, this is it. He knows because he knows. And he basically does the equivalent of writing her a check and walks out the room. And she looks down at the amount on the check and nearly hits the fucking ceiling. And this enables her to be able to move her mother to a better hospital eventually, which she is very grateful for. Later on, she's actually hired to work for the state. This is one of those things, again, guys. The state just seems like bad news. So while I want to be happy for her that she has a job now, I can't be happy for anybody who gets hired by the state. It's just one of those things, man. You know? It's like government jobs now. Like, it's not even government jobs. It's like if somebody became a cop, pretty much, you know, and you're just like, I guess. I know you're only like a librarian for the evidence for the cops or something, but it still sucks. And Al and Ed get to work on trying to decipher what's actually going on here. Because obviously, this is all written in some kind of code. And they start off pretty optimistic. There's like a couple of things that they immediately zero in on, and they're like, oh, I think this means that. Which is the kind of thing where they might be right, or it might be just that they look like an obvious answer because he has written this code in such a way to confuse even people who do know alchemical recipes and stuff. I am reading too much into it. It doesn't matter. Zitiegi says it's Philosopher's Stone sweet and sour. Oh, I'm so sorry, kiddos. I don't know what you're referencing, Zitiegi. I have already forgotten what I said 5 minutes ago. Overfilled sponge. I'm sorry. But, because the recipe. I get it now. My God. You guys, you see how bad this has gotten? How do I do this anymore? I ask you. I feel so betrayed by my own brain sometimes. I swear to God. All right. So then we cut from them being like, oh, I think I know what this means, to the two of them like pass the fuck out on the table going, why is this so hard though? Which is honestly a fucking mood. I cannot tell you the number of projects I have started, and I have been so excited. I've got all my tools. I did research. I have the best of everything ready to go. And like 2/3 of the way in, I'm like, this was a mistake. I should not have done this. I shouldn't have gotten involved. I should have paid somebody. I should have not done it. So eventually they do crack the code. But it is not good news. So, guys, all right. So we have Hughes show up. And this is the part where he says we've had a lot of things to deal with. The Tucker Chimera situation needs to be settled. Then we had the, burning down of the library that had a lot of our notes and stuff in it. And it's got files, I guess, records about, like, probably most of the workings of this government. And so I just can't get past the fact that I feel like Hughes is up to no good. Guys, why am I so suspicious of everybody on this show? Do you hear the way I'm relaying what he said to them with this like low-key tone of allegedly? Maybe. This is what he says. Who knows? I don't have any reason to treat what he says in this manner. There's no evidence of anything except just vaguely suspicious behavior, which for all I know has been planted to make me suspicious of the wrong person. It may be a red herring, and I'm falling for it. It would not be the first time. So So anyway, he gives her the job and she is very excited, drags her out, and then they get back to work. We have the two guards that are sort of interested in the two of them because, one, they were assigned as guards to these two in the first place. Two, they talk to the colonel like he's just a bud of theirs and they don't show him like the deference or respect that is expected. Three, Ed paid an astronomical amount of money for that girl's time that it doesn't really seem like he should have that kind of money. And then finally, they fall asleep at their posts. Not great guards, by the way. And when they open the doors and go in to check on these boys, place is fucking trash. It's the kind of thing that if this were a bedroom of like a real person, you could smell it when you walked in. You know, this is the room in a dorm where everybody was pulling like 2 all-nighters in a row. And you walk in and it's just like body odor, probably the smell of fucking Red Bull mixed in somewhere, and vaguely probably cigarette smoke for the stress smokers. And there's empty Dorito bags and Mountain Dew all over the fucking place. That's the energy when they walk back into this room. So they're like, so you still haven't figured it out? And Al is like, oh no, yeah, we did. And it turns out that the missing piece is a human life. Ed says this is the devil's research. Marco was right. It should be destroyed. It's evil. And honestly, guys, everybody is all shocked that the main ingredient is human life. I mean, come on. We all knew it was going to be human life, right? I didn't even think that was like up for debate. It's wild that that wasn't even considered by these two. They seemed genuinely surprised. You're trying to make something that can create stuff out of nothing. You're trying to make something that has the ability to give you everything you want for no price. Obviously, you are going to have to pay a hefty fucking price up front to get what is essentially access that is unlimited to wild amounts of unnatural power. It's just logic, man. It's just come on. Duh. And everybody is so saddened and horrified. And I swear to God, just what? How? Ed? What? Of course, kids. So, okay, all right, moving on. And this is when Ed says, okay, first the main ingredient is human life. And then he says, in order to manufacture even a single stone, you have to make multiple human sacrifices. And I cannot get over Ross's response to this, which is, how could the military authorize something so horrible? Baby cakes, where have you been? What do you think these people do? They genocided an entire country, and you're like, I can't believe they kill people for research. These people don't think. They don't think. It's just funny, honestly, at this point. I can't believe it. I'm sure you can't. So Ed says, do us a favor. Don't speak to anybody about this. And these two fucking just cannot stick to that. Later on, when they have spilled the beans, they say something like, well, it's hard to not share things with somebody like Armstrong. And I'm like, I mean, he's a forceful personality, but also it's not like you were tortured. And I say this as somebody who freely admits that I would not stand up to torture at all. I would tell you everything you wanted to know the minute I saw any sort of tool in your hand. I'd be like, all right, here it is, all of it. But yeah, he gets up on them, and when they try, they're whispering, and he catches them, and they're like, oh, it's nothing. And he just says, your behavior is most suspicious. And then he busts into the room and is just like, oh, this is so tragic. And just with his usual overblown self, it's great. Ed, meanwhile, is thinking about how, I can't believe we found the information that we're looking for. And it's this. And it feels like this specific answer to our problems is like meant to be sort of a sick joke as punishment for the fact that we committed a taboo. Like we were set up to want something desperately and given just enough to think we could get it, and then it was taken away. And in this moment, Ed says something to Al like, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a while. And they get interrupted by Armstrong knocking on the door. Okay, what was it? Because honestly, I sort of assumed the first time that it was like, there may be no way to get your body back, bud. Like, it's been on my mind, and we have to consider it a real possibility that you are stuck like this. But Ed is so dogged and determined and seemed so certain up until this very point that he could do this. It really seemed like he fully believed, I just need to figure out how, but I know it's possible. So him saying, this has been on my mind to tell you for a while, I don't know if that would really make sense. The other thing could be, I wanted to tell you about all of the like information that I discovered about whatever in like, I don't know how much he told Al about his experience when he sort of like crossed over to the other plane. I mean, yeah, I don't like, how much has Ed shared about that with anybody? He has lost a leg and an arm, but are people aware of why that happened? And if it's not a spoiler, you guys can tell me. Does Al know that Ed specifically like sacrificed his arm to get Al's body back? Did I say that backwards? Does Al know that Ed sacrificed his arm to get Al's body back? Or not body, but like soul, I guess. Is he aware that that is what happened there? And I say this with the still awareness that we don't actually see that exchange happen. We see him say, take my arm, take my body, anything, just give me my brother back. And he slaps his hands together to start the circle. And that's all we see. And we assume, because he said, take my arm, that that's what they did. They took the arm, gave him his brother's soul back, and that was as close as he could get. But it might not be what it looked like. You know, we're working with this assumption. If they come out and be like, actually, that's not how it happened, though, you dodo, I will not be too surprised, but I really don't have any like guess as to what an alternative explanation would be. Ryan says, yes, Al knows that. Okay, good call. Thank you. Because I do want Al to be informed of what's happening here. But anyway, okay, so yeah, this is when Armstrong comes in, and this is when Ed is like, I'm starting to think that there's actually more to this than we thought. Because he said there's truth within the truth. And I was sort of thinking about that as well, and kind of, because it didn't really fit, I was like, I don't know, maybe he just said a thing that sounded profound and it's nothing. But Al decides to take this a little bit more literally. So they're looking at the laboratories and the way that they are set up. And the third laboratory is the one that Marco used to work in. And Ed's looking at this like, I don't see anybody doing very much research that is like particularly notable. And I believe one of the guards, it might be Ross. I think I was calling the dude Ross because I keep thinking that means a first name, but I think it's a last name. I think that's the guy or the woman. But she says that it's not structurally sound and that building is out of use. To which Ed is like, oh, is it? I'm sure it is. And they decide to go and do a little bit of light spying. It turns into pretty heavy spying pretty quickly. This feels like a very Area 51 sort of situation. So, yeah. And I love when he's like, that's it. And when Brosh asks, how do you know? He says there's a prison right next door. And I was like, oh, dang. That I didn't expect. It's completely within the bounds of what's real. Like, guys, we have not got a great record of the things that we do to our prisoners. But again, I keep being surprised by where this show is willing to go. I just don't know what to expect in terms of like the tone, and I probably should have a better idea by now, but you know, that's intense. It's just, I think the reason that I'm having trouble knowing is because of the fact that we're dealing with some really intense issues in terms of like, you know, the war itself, the experiments being done with Chimera and genocide. And then we have like Ed's total failure to like interrogate the fact that he has signed it up to work for a group that does these things. And I keep sort of interpreting that as the show not wanting to deal with those issues and questions. And I think I've got to rethink that and see it more as they're telling me that Ed doesn't want to deal with those issues. But the show isn't shy about reminding me over and over again that shit happened. So, yeah, I think I need to sort of change the way that I keep seeing Ed's denial, because I saw it as like a writing trick. And instead, I think it's supposed to be showing us some of his personality. The only problem with that is that Al is partnered with Ed, and he is a sweet cinnamon roll, and he has no problem with any of this either, and isn't asking those questions. And if anybody were going to be asking those questions, I really think Al would. I can see Ed not asking because he's so single-minded, and to a point, he's really self-centered, you know? But Al going along and not really seeing the issue, that's harder for me. So I'm going to sort of accept it that the show is only going to have Al be Ed's conscience, so to speak, when they need him to be. And otherwise we're going to treat Al as an extension of Ed a little bit. Let's see. Kyle says, I think part of it is because for American cartoons have a very clear delineation between kid shows and adult shows, but anime is way blurrier in terms of what you can show versus who your demographic is. Yeah, that's fair. But it also is like what is intended and what is the way I'm reading it. You know, the denial that Ed seems to be in about the questionable moral fiber of who he works for is that intentionally meant to be frustrating and noticeable that he's in denial? Or am I supposed to be like kind of hand waving his denial and taking their explanations about what was done just as like background information, but I'm not supposed to be questioning Al's involvement? It's hard to know sometimes what is me deciding to like get on this train of thought and ride it all the way to the end, and what the show actually wants me to think and question. And it can be really, really hard to tell. And I don't mean just with this. Everything I cover, that comes up. You know, what am I supposed to be bothered by? And what am I supposed to sort of ignore for the sake of the story? And it can be a bit of a mixed message, because sometimes they will like address something that you were thinking and you didn't think they'd bring up. And so because they addressed that, then you start to think, oh, okay, so all of this is on purpose. And it turns out maybe not. Like that one thing that they addressed, yes, but all the other things, they do want you to forget about those. It can be difficult. You know, I'm running into this with One Piece. There's a whole storyline where I'm just like, this person is supposed to be somebody that we're rooting for to be in charge, and they seem really not up for the job. And it's very clear to me that they are not. And yet I'm very obviously supposed to be on their side. And we have a character question whether they're up for it. And I was like, oh, maybe they're actually going to talk about this. And then it sort of dropped. So anyway, that's my main question is like, how much is Ed just meant to be sort of a vessel for us to see a lot of this? And because we're just following him around, and how much of it is actually meant to be like a journey of his growing understanding and beginning to cope with the price that he's willing to pay and whether or not it's really worth it. I think it's the latter. I'm hoping it's the latter. But Al does kind of throw a wrench into things because I feel like Al should have brought it up and he has not. Anyway, okay. I'm sorry. I'm getting repetitive here. So yeah, they notice that there's a prison right next door, and they realize all of a sudden that there's going to be plenty of people who are condemned to death. And if you need a human life for this thing, then you can just use prisoners who are being executed. And ta-da, it's perfect. And I just fucking... Ross, I think, is the one who says something like, I wonder if the government is involved. You wonder if the government is involved in the experiments that were being researched by a state alchemist, that the experiments are taking place in a government building next to a prison full of people that are being like monitored and tracked and sentenced to death by the justice system that is run by the government. You're wondering? These people. So, yeah, eventually, Ross is just like, I feel like we're starting to uncover something really dangerous. And I really do enjoy Ed and Al being like, well, we did try to tell you to not fucking tell anybody, but you didn't want to listen to us, so I guess here we fucking are. And I love this. As Armstrong is leaving, he's like, and you two, behave yourselves. And he does that thing where he's like towering over them and his eyes turn into like red lasers. And they swear they would never. And they seem genuinely scared in the moment. But then we smash cut to them at night outside the building, watching, deciding how best to break into the place, which is pretty good. So they are noticing, first of all, this building is allegedly out of service and unstable, but there's a guard posted outside. That's weird. And then when Ed goes in, there are lights on and stuff. It's clearly a facility that is being used. And he has to go by himself, by the way, because of the fact that his brother is too big to like fit in the shafts that he is using to gain entry. And it's pretty fun. He thinks to himself how lucky it is that he's so small and can actually fit, and then gets really mad at himself for calling himself small. I liked it. That was pretty good. So then we see these couple people inside. This is so, you guys, I don't know what to make of this at all. It says 48 is talking to 66. And 48 is telling 66, it looks as if we've got guests. And we see 48's face, which is like, it looks like a suit of armor. And 66 has one glowing red eye inside of what looks like a metal mask of a skull, like a lion's mane and a lion's skull. It's weird. 66 says, some daredevil idiots came to visit, did they? And so, first of all, what are these people? Because they don't look like regular people. Like those masks, unquote. I really am getting the impression that they're part of their faces. And apparently you can replace people's body parts with metal in this world. Like you can do the automail. So it might just be that. But I don't know. I would be tempted to say that they were the result of an experiment. But they seem really loyal to this facility in a way that if this was like done to you, I wouldn't think you would be willing to like be a watchdog. I might be wrong, you know, like you could be, I guess, sort of like programmed or put in a position where there's no alternative, I guess. But the fact that they not only are clearly like, oh, somebody's breaking into our shit, we can't have that. And they seem genuinely to be like, oh, who the fuck is this? And the fact that they know Ed is here already, which, like, how? Can they hear him? Can they feel him? Like, sense him? Is there some sort of, like, weird security system that he doesn't know about? Because he, like, hasn't even dropped through the vent into the building yet. And they're already talking about him being here. So, outside, Al is thinking to himself, wow, Ed is taking a long time. I wonder what's going on. And, you know, I'm thinking it really doesn't seem like it was that long, but I guess we did cut here. And as he's standing there, like, just waiting for his brother to come back, we see this dude with the fucking, like, weird skull mane thing leap down from the roof of a building onto Al with what looks like meat cleaver in one hand. Which, I guess, if this were actually a person in armor, might be effective. I'm wondering, like, maybe these people are like Al and their souls are bound to armor? I don't know. But I mean, clearly the way that they're like hidden in this building, and we haven't seen anything like them before, they're either rare or they're a total secret and being kept secret on purpose. I'm acting like they're victims of something. For all I know, they're in fucking charge. You know, like the way they're vibing here feels like they're in charge, but middle management can get like that. You know, there's really no way of knowing until you get the rest of the team in there who really runs the show. So, yeah, I don't know. What's going on? Oh, Damien is telling me a two-part story. Sorry, Damien, I saw the first one, or the second one first. Fun fact, they use a metal mixing bowl to get the tinny sound for these characters. Mike McFarland is very protective of that bowl. Havoc, voice director. Havoc, is that a character name? Damien says he tells a story about his mother coming by and washing dishes and washing the bowl. He nearly died because he'd just announced Brotherhood, and so he was prepping for it by getting things from the OG version. That's funny. I know how that can be, though. You get fixated on like this one particular thing, and you start to think, I literally cannot make the thing without it. And it turns out, like, yeah, you definitely can. But it's, it's a prop that means something to you, and that's fine. That's still valid. So that's the end of the episode. It cuts as this guy is leaping down on Al. We don't even get to see Al, like, start to really defend himself. He, like, sees the dude. So it ends knowing that Al is aware he's being attacked, which helps. One would think with a sort of cliffhanger like this, it would end with Al being attacked without looking or noticing. But I kind of appreciate that we get to see him spotting the guy. Makes me feel a little bit better. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to come out on top, but I'm pretty confident he's going to come out on top. Whether that means that he kills this dude or just manages to like keep him from killing him. So yeah, I am not sure what more to make of this. And I got to tell you guys something. So Max, I believe it was Max, sent me an email with a list of the episodes that have post-credit scenes, which like not all of them do. And I appreciate that because there is a thing happening on these episodes, and I don't know if it depends on what platform you're using or if every platform does this, but sometimes they start to tell you the next time on after the credits, which that was a thing that Doctor Who used to do as well, but they didn't even have the credits roll first. They just immediately would jump into it and start to spoil me, and it was like incredibly annoying. Does the next time on happen for all of you every time? And bigger question, does the next time on happen after the like bonus scene, the post-credit scene sometimes? Because I'm really hoping it will be obvious when the post-credit scene is over and I should stop playing so that I don't see any spoilers for the next episode. Because I don't want to accidentally keep watching and wind up getting half the plot. Because that is a real thing. Like, they will tell you so many important aspects of the next episode in a way that I'm like, why watch it now? I know what's going to happen. So if any of you guys have advice for me on that, I am accepting suggestions and warnings. And I had somebody get in touch, and I'm sorry, guys. I get so many messages lately, and it's been so hard to keep track of everything. But somebody was expressing some frustration with the fact that I have been advised to not watch the opening credits because they don't consider it really spoilery if you don't have context for anything. And while I do understand that, and I could see that point for most people, because of the way that I do coverage, stuff that doesn't seem like a spoiler still deeply informs my guesswork. And it's just safer, I think, to not. You know, it might not seem hugely important, but it might lodge itself in my brain and become something that sort of ruins a thing that you guys were looking forward to me truly experiencing for the first time. It's just too risky. I don't want to do it. I feel like for an ordinary watcher, I think that's probably fair and it would just wash over you. But I watch things now in a different way than I used to. And I would absolutely begin to like start to take note, especially if I watched the credits repeatedly. I would definitely start to absorb things. So, okay. Zjagi says, I think it's pretty obvious when the post-credits is over. Okay, cool. Thank you, Zjagi. And Zjagi says, yeah, you really might be too smart for the opening. I'm not trying to say that. It's just, you know, people, they binge stuff. And when you binge, you don't give yourself the time to chew over what you just watched. And you, therefore, often don't theorize about certain things or let yourself come to certain conclusions. And because I take my time between every episode the way I do, it's just I'm gonna figure some things out before a normal viewer who's watching it the way most people watch things would. And that's no shade to a normal viewer. That's how it's meant to be watched often, you know? But it is part of the risk that comes with covering things the way I do. And this happened with Mistborn. There was something that was supposed to be like a big twist at the end of the second book that I had like not only seen coming, but thought was supposed to have been figured out. So when it's treated as this big reveal later in the book, I was genuinely like, but we knew this. And it turns out, no, we did not know this. A lot of people were not in the same place that I was and had not figured this out at all. So, you know, it was one of those where I was like, oops, sorry guys. Because everybody was like listening and they had been looking forward to me getting to this like shocking reveal. And like months ahead of time, I had figured it out and sort of ruined it already. So yeah, it can be a risk. It can be a risk. So, all right, guys, I'm going to wrap. But thank you very much again to Max for commissioning this episode. Thank you all very much for joining me in the chat. And yeah, I will be seeing you all on Friday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.